Thanks for inviting me, Ashley. And I'm thrilled to talk about Luna Azul. I really do like talking about it. Um, so I just want to talk real briefly about, what it is, how it came to be, and then uh, and what it is and isn't, and then stop talking and then take questions. And my only concern about that is, do I give blathering answers? I really do like talking about this. So just wave if I'm talking too much, and I'll try and reel it back in. Um, so you saw from the video, actually, if I can share screen, this is a really good picture. There, does that come up?
Yes.
This. So you can see the whole site plan. What Luna Azul is a pocket neighborhood. So there's 30 homes. They're all built to face one another, and they all have big front porches. You can see them in the drawings, and they face a common green space, and none of the homes have garages. So that's deliberate. Um, the idea is in pocket neighborhoods, which are built for typically developed folks, as well as here, there's more neighborly interaction. So people walking in and out because they have to park in the center. This was built for the benefit of my daughter and other people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and importantly, for their families too. And a good pivot in this discussion about what it is how it came to be. And it was sort of a dare from my wife about the time my daughter was 13, and she's 24 now. And we were talking about what her adult life looked like. And my wife knew more about this than I did, and was rattling off the options. And we actually visited some of these places, and I didn't like them. And my wife said, "Well, if you're so smart, why don't you come up with something else?" So I did, and quit my job. What we realized getting into this was we couldn't even identify sometimes what we didn't like about the places we were visiting. And so we went at it another way. I said to my wife, if I'm Warren Buffett and I had all the money in the world, what would we build? What would it look like for our daughter? And we came up with 7 criteria. And I'm going to tell you what those are, but you'll see how those are all present here. And this worked for us. I'm not trying to sell anything. You can see these are all sold out. This was what we were looking for, and we were able to finally articulate it with these 7 criteria. The first one was it had to be safe, of course. This has a perimeter wall and a gated, you can see the gates there, like here and here. And it has a perimeter wall and 24/7 staff in the center house, in the clubhouse. There's no turret or guard station or anything like that, or there's nobody walking around with a taser or anything at night. But it's a gated community, and that's what we wanted for safety. Really important for us was permanence too. So uh, we have sold title to these homes. These are 30, there's 32 and 3 bedroom homes. We sold title. And part of the reason we did that, besides just the cost differential between renting and owning and having equity at the end of the line when you want to sell the home, um, the idea that somebody else was going to decide whether to renew my daughter's lease or whether they were going to sell their property for a higher and better use or because they couldn't make a go of the business, that was haunting to us. So by selling title, and you'll find out about other attributes that happen with that benefit. One is permanence. We know that our daughter has a place to live as long as she wants to live there. We own it. Um, so safety and permanence, inclusive was another one, and this was important to us. One thing I could have done is just bought a condo for my daughter. But we were concerned, I always like to say, she's not going to get invited to the pool party if if she was surrounded by typically developed folks. So we knew, and we didn't want her to be isolated in in a building. So we knew we had to, you know, try and make an inclusive place and really market to folks with disability. You don't, it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of disability, even in favor of it. So anybody could buy these homes, but they're all purchased by somebody who has disability in the family and wants their kid in an inclusive environment. Um, we wanted some place where independence was maximized for her. And we were concerned if she lived, for example, in a group home, that she was, I'm really trying to be careful with my words, and this is where some of the blathering comes in. The care staff is geared toward the lowest common denominator. So if there is somebody there that wanders, then you have to lock down those premises. Whereas here, and we invite caregivers in, and I'll talk about that in a second, and everybody there chooses their own care staff or replaces them. We knew that our daughter could flourish to the extent that was appropriate for her, and not, her care wouldn't be dictated by what the neighbor's needs might be, which are often sometimes much more involved, and sometimes, I mean, we have people that have no, people that drive that live there. And we have people that have 24/7 care that are not ambulatory, don't speak. Um, and so we knew with this design, by inviting caregivers into a house that we own, that our daughter's care was going to be maximized. So to the extent that was appropriate for her. Control is one of the factors, but you've heard me just talking about that by choosing or replacing caregivers, for example, but choosing or replacing roommates or painting a room purple or having a pet. In any rental model, we thought it was unfair to say to the landlord, well, my daughter wants to bring our Labrador to the house. Um, a landlord, of course, should be able to say, yeah, we don't allow pets here. But in our home, if we want to bring a dog in, for example, that's what we do. Environment was one of the elements too. I I remember looking at some fantastic, by the way, farms and ranches that were, 3-hour drive out of town. But I realized that if it wasn't an urban environment where she was living, closer to urban amenities and, concerts and art and restaurants, hospitals. But if it was 3.5 hours out of town, I knew I wasn't going to see her nearly as much as if it was 20 minutes away from our house, which is what it is now. And the final element for us was cost. The congregate models that I had seen, I'll be honest, we simply couldn't afford. And the way I looked at this home purchase, which I was able to finance and I got a mortgage, um, it's more expensive, but it's comparable to college and graduate school for my other kid. And this daughter is not going to college and graduate school and was entitled, I felt, that we would be putting money, at least as much money for her future as well. So once we were able to articulate those 7 factors, we quickly found out, well, it doesn't exist. Nothing like this exists. And so that was the dare from my wife. If you think you're so smart, why don't you go build it? And I am very pleased to say it is built, it's sold out, and it's beyond my dreams how well it's working and what a community we've built. And multi-generational. There's mothers that live there, there's fathers that live there, there's kids that all across the spectrum, from very intense caregiving needs to none at all or very little. I want to talk about, and because this is one of the things that makes it very unique and has been a problem to some parents and a godsend to others, and that is our service model. We didn't build Luna Azul to provide services. Or let me first distinguish between inside the home services and outside the home services. So outside the home services, landscaping, maintaining the pool, taking care of the clubhouse, taking care of those gates, painting, fixing roof holes on the roof or something like that. That's all handled by the HOA and the homeowner association. And we have staff there that's 24/7 available. And so the HOA is higher than it might otherwise be, but that's sort of a governor, it works as a governor on who wants to move in there. That's part of the way we were able to keep the character of the community for people with disabilities, because the HOA was higher. If you don't want that staff, then why do you want to live there? Why do you want to pay that freight? So that's outside the home services. Inside the home services, every home is unique. Every person is unique. Every resident requires different care. And like I said, some here require 24/7, some require none. My daughter has somebody come every day for some time, but she can sleep alone at night. The control element is I get to replace caregivers who aren't working out, and the struggle to find caregivers, which I'm sure everybody on this call is aware of. I work with two different vendors right now that come into the home because one couldn't get all of our needs taken care of. So I went to another vendor. So I have that flexibility, whereas virtually every rental model for congregate living for people with IDD that I've seen marries the service with the rent. And that's why it's so expensive, because they're providing services as well. If the services end up sucking sometime in the future, my only remedy was for my daughter to move. Whereas in this model, the caregiver, this is supported housing. This is, in Arizona, they call it an IDLA. So I'm inviting caregivers that I approve into the home. And in our case, we have the state is paying that vendor to take care of my daughter. So it's total control for us, and the state is paying for it. And that's one of the reasons we built in Phoenix. I was living in Seattle when we designed this. There's a bigger pool of caregivers in Phoenix than there is perhaps north of Seattle. I think largely because of the cost of living. Most important, or another thing that's very important to us, when rental models blend services with rent, it has been or remains my conclusion that it's a very narrow band of people that move in. So if you require a lot more care, you're not eligible to live in that facility. They're not set up for that. If you require very little or no care, you're wondering, why am I paying this much money to live in this congregate facility? So we wanted a community that had a wide breadth of abilities, and disabilities, but also multi-generational. And it came to be, we have mothers that live there. One is a registered nurse that just happens to live there. We have lawyers. We have a very involved board. Everybody knows everybody else's name. Everybody knows their kid. It's a little village, and I'm really very proud of it. The last thing I want to say before I open this to questions, Ashley asked me to talk about, do I have any words of advice? for anybody that's listening that might want to try and build one of these themselves. Um, the most important word I have is persistence. This was a many-year project, and I got in deep. And I think back on when I started, I really had no idea what I was getting into. But I met many people that wanted to help me with their vision. And I found that lenders, especially, and others don't much like hearing never been done before, which I can appreciate. But so many people said, "Oh, you need to do this, or you need to do." For example, group meals. You have to have a commercial kitchen in the clubhouse and have group meals there. And I was adamant I didn't want to do that, and I can go into why, but I didn't want to do that. My point is, I was persistent in my vision, and what I built was what my wife and I wanted to see. I got lucky that 29 other purchasers showed up and wanted to join us. But I was true to that vision. Trying to raise money was very difficult, and I blew past like 3 deadlines with my wife. She kept saying, "Okay, if you don't raise the money by this time, will you go back and get a real job?" And uh, I ran into that deadline 3 different times. And every time, and I said, "Okay, we had a deal. I'm going to go back and get a job, but where will our daughter live?" And so, I mean, if I had a great idea for a restaurant or something, I think my wife would have left me. But because I was doing it for her, and so I kept at it. So again, just perseverance. And um, bottom line is, it takes a lot of time, and it takes access to a lot of capital. If you have both of those things, if you have time to put in and you have access to capital, this will get done. If you are lacking either one of those, time or money, and you don't have a persistent voice leading this forward, the odds are much less that this will happen. But if you're serious about it, and you can tap into capital to help, and you're willing to spend the time, this isn't that complicated. It can be done. So with that, I just want to answer questions. If anybody wants any more details about this, again, just wave if I'm talking too much. I really do like talking about it.
Yeah. So Mark, can you unshare the screen and we
Yes.
will go into questions. And so for those of you who have questions, can you please let's see. Oh, yeah, okay. So gallery. Can you please start let's see. Okay. And adding the questions in the chat box, and we will go over the questions, and then we'll have more conversations afterwards. So we have plenty of time. So the first question is, what kind of technologies are used in homes and in common areas?
So I'm glad you asked that question. We wired all the homes with Cat 6 wiring, and but we didn't put in ambient technologies. So my daughter, there's a smart thermostat, and there's a couple cameras, and Alexa, a video Alexa. Other homes have entirely different or no use of technologies, and many other technologies existed, but we didn't want to choose the technologies for any of the homes we were building. What we wanted to do was provide in the walls really thick cabling, so that whatever ambient technologies come around in the next several years, you'll have the bandwidth to get that done. So the answer is every home's different. To answer that question.
Uh, how do you begin financing such a project? And that might be very different for every project, because I know that if you had to do it If you had to do it all over again, what would you have done?
Well, I'm investigating now whether to do this again, but this Luna Azul was deliberately for profit. We didn't take any government subsidies. We didn't take any municipality subsidies. And it was very deliberate because they always have strings coming with them. And so, we raised a small portion of the total budget, for equity, and then everything else was debt. And we found a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution out of New York, that loaned us a bunch of the money, but not all of what we still needed. And we just had to puzzle it together. And my wife, if she can hear me, would point out we had to personally guarantee the debt. So that was extraordinarily stressful. Um, and I promised my wife that I would not do that again in this lifetime or the next. I would not guarantee debt again. So now we're looking at whether we can do this through a charitable foundation, whether that makes more sense. Anyway,
Um, yeah.
we puzzled it together is what we did.
Where did you meet other parents interested in such a project?
Um, So our closest friends, since we had a kid, that was our first kid that we had with a disability, we ended up, friends with other couples that had kids with disability. So I'm not sure how to answer that. We met many, many uh, friends and contacts. And then when we talked about what we were thinking of doing, we always, were stroked and encouraged to do it. Wow, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't you do that? So I'm not sure how.
But eventually, you're the one that actually did the project. It's not like you worked as a group. It was you and your wife mostly.
It was me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
my wife had to sign for the personal guarantee. And also, I don't mean to minimize her involvement at all. I mean, I couldn't have done it without her at my side. But yes, this design and finding the financing and all that stuff, yes, that was me.
Yeah. How long did it take to sell out the homes? And did you have a realtor to help market them?
Okay, those are two very related but different questions. So yes, we had a broker help us, a realtor here in Phoenix. It Many of you on this phone call may have read about this. What we had in the middle of this, you may have heard of this, was a global pandemic. And so I was trying to sell homes during a global pandemic with lenders just so it took, and this leads in, it probably from the time we bought the parcel to selling. So, and we had to build, and we had to raise more financing, and we had to sell to build, and we had the last home sold from the time we bought the parcel in 2000 October 2016. We sold the last home in February, 2 months ago, February 24. So it took way too long. I learned a whole lot. I have some theories about why it took that long, in addition to the pandemic. Um, it and all the while with millions of dollars of debt, lenders looking at us. It was horrifying. Um, but it's over now. I think it's all sold out, and the people there seem very happy.
You persevered, Mark.
I persevered, exactly. Yes. I Once I was into it, you didn't really have a choice. 6 years into it, you got to see this through now. So, yeah.
What are the first steps after coming up with a vision?
Um, what are the first steps?
Have a
I
drink
had
first.
to spend I mean, it's my makeup to like create solutions to problems. And so I would just be awake thinking about the design. And I read about this guy in north of Seattle who was like the father of pocket neighborhoods. And I wrote to him an email, and the gatekeeper wrote me back. And like within 3 hours, or the gatekeeper wrote me back and said, fill out this form. Who are you? This guy's really famous. What do you want? And then I wrote to him, and within 3 hours, I said what I was thinking of. They said, "Can you be up here next week?" Well, so he's the guy that did the site plan for this. But and he did pretty pictures. When I was going out to try and raise money, I had to have the land tied up. I had to have the survey done. I had to entitlement changes underway. I had to have the pretty pictures from the architect. I had to spend my own money, uh, hundred hundreds of thousands by the time this was over, of my own money to get this done. So unfortunately, even before you go out to raise money, it takes money to raise money, is what I'm saying. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it took dreaming and perseverance, and you know, and praying that your spouse isn't going to leave you. So the first thing you do is you quit your job, then you start spending down your savings because you're chasing your dream. And the third thing is you pray your spouse doesn't leave in the midst of all this. And once again, because I was doing it for our daughter, and this seemed like a unique, worthwhile way to spend our time, my wife is still on the other side of this wall.
All right, so I'm gonna skip the question about accessing capital because I believe you already addressed that. What is the cost of the homes and HOA fees?
The HOAs right now, the dues are about 1,200 a month. So I'd say without, if it was a gated neighborhood, 30 homes, landscaping and maintaining the gates and the pool and all this stuff, you might pay 300 a month. So that is quite a delta. The difference is the staff. So again, there's activities in the clubhouse every day or every evening, at least. There's monthly parties that the parents come to there, and the residents. There's stuff going on there. And so it's really the staffing that is responsible for the delta. Um, and I remember early on talking to one mom whose kid has 24/7 care in the home. And I said to her, does this bother you, the size of the HOA dues? Um, even you already have 24/7 care in the home. Why, do you resent there's somebody at the clubhouse at night? And she was one of the most adamant parents. Don't mess with my staff. I will pay. That it's this peace of mind. And I used to tell the story or give the example. If I was in Mexico and my daughter called me and said, I think somebody's in my backyard, I can call the staff at 2 in the morning and say, will you go look in my daughter's backyard? If there's somebody there, please call the police. If there's nobody there, will you please just knock on the door and tell her everything's fine? So that kind of peace of mind is what we're all paying for. And there's no doubt it is expensive, but between the cost of the mortgage and the cost of the HOA, comparing that to what I would have paid renting, I'm still light years ahead, in the long-term financial picture.
I have a question actually. So are you people who own the homes, if in case of them having to leave the community, are they allowed to sell to anybody, or is this somewhat restricted to only selling to those that have disability, exclusive to people with disabilities?
So, great question. We put in a right of first offer. It's a backwards right of first refusal
Okay.
in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. So when my wife and I die, if and the home that we own for our daughter is in a special needs trust. Obviously, she can't own that home. Um, my other daughter will be the remainderment of that trust. So if it falls to her, so then my older daughter dies, and now my daughter can keep it as an income property, or let's say she wants to sell it. She can go to the market and, get any price she wants, but she has to come to the HOA first, and they're entitled to flip it. So
Okay.
if they have a waiting list, and we already do have a waiting list, um, you name your price, but you've got to offer it to the HOA. So that the HOA can, that's one way it can really maintain the integrity of the community.
Okay. I think we did discuss the project timeline and approach, but how did you select the site and what was the project cost?
Um, I selected the site. First of all, I grew up in Phoenix as a kid and followed my wife to Seattle in the early 90s. And I kept saying, I want to move back to Phoenix. I want to move back to Phoenix. And my wife kept saying, fine, go, move. But I kind of wanted her to come along. And so she said I was playing the long game. So first of all, the cost of the land and the cost of building in Phoenix compared to Seattle is remarkable. It's so much less expensive and so much faster than if you're trying to do this in Seattle. So that was one reason I was looking in Arizona. The other reason is, United Cerebral Palsy used to do those rankings, the state of the states, and rank the states in terms of their Medicaid delivery systems for adults with IDD. And Arizona was coming out at the top. They grade in 6 categories and then they give an overall score. Arizona had the number one slot overall score like 6 years in a running, 6 years in a row. And so that was the second reason. The third reason was I knew I'd be building in a retirement mecca. So we knew we could advertise in Chicago and we have families from Pennsylvania or from, Tennessee. Um, and so we knew like not a lot of people are moving to Seattle to retire. More are moving to Phoenix to retire. So that's sort of how I chose Arizona. Finding the parcel, it's 4.5 acres. There isn't a whole lot of infill opportunity. Certainly in Seattle, there's none. In Phoenix, there still is some. We could have bought a parcel and done a tear down and stuff, but this was a vacant lot, and it worked. And so we bought it. I hope I answered the question.
Do homeowners also rent out room to those that can't afford or don't wish to buy?
Yes, both. So we have some homeowners whose they don't believe their child is ready yet to move into the home. So they bought the home and now they've rented it out that covers their HOA nut and I mean, the family I'm thinking of, were able to just buy the home without a mortgage, but this covered repair. I mean, it was more than the HOA by far, the rent they got, and covered any repairs and all this stuff. And they rented it out to people that had no disability at all, but they just wanted to live in a gated neighborhood. The parents are huge supporters of what we're trying to do here. And I think really took some time to explain to their tenants what to expect and where you're moving in and stuff. And the people that have moved in without disability have been very friendly to disability and just great neighbors. Um, there are others who live there who rent out rooms to uh, somebody else with a disability. Um, our home is a 2-story home. We've rented out the upstairs to a woman with no disability who is a caregiver by day, but not for our daughter. So she doesn't need an apartment. We're giving her way reduced rent to just live there and just sort of be a roommate for our daughter who has the master bedrooms downstairs and the kitchen is downstairs. And so every home is different, but we have that flexibility. Nobody else that I'm aware of has rented out to somebody with, well, either a family with no disability at all, but if they have their kid with a disability living there, to rent out a room to somebody without disability, I think we may be the only ones at Luna Azul that did that, but it's that flexibility and it's that control that I yearned when I set out on this.
So was Olmsted an issue for you?
Was what an issue?
Olmsted decision to integrate. You guys
No,
are integrated.
and so Ashley, you and I have spoken about that, and the CMS rules. There's a lot of lore out there and a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of old school. I mean, that there are people that are working hard to ensure that my daughter doesn't ever end up in an institution is a great thing, and I'm very happy with it, with that idea. But to to say that Luna Azul is an institution because you put a gate around it, um, is anathema to what we were trying to do. And I knew a number of parents that felt similarly to me. I mean, if my parents can live in a gated neighborhood or I could live in a gated neighborhood, why can't my daughter? Um, and plus, I was trying to build a traffic-free environment, no garages and all this. Um, so, and Olmsted is the Supreme Court ruling. The CMS rules, I think, were in reaction to Olmsted. And no, so I mean, again, I ran into people that said, "Oh, you can't do that. That's an institution," or you can't build a gate, or you can't, you're segregating these people from the community. And I thought that was wrongheaded, and I have not had any problem. I've had, one of our residents, uh, or one of the owners, not a resident, although he stays there once a week. He was the former director of the Department of Health Services for the state of Arizona. I mean, I've had no regulatory issues at all. And part of that might be, again, because we sought no government assistance in getting this done. Very intentionally, we did not want to take any grants or anything like that, or have to answer for, to strings that might be attached to the money.
Well, what would you have done differently? What do you wish you had done differently?
I should have started buying lottery tickets a lot earlier. That's pretty much my retirement plan now. You know, that is a whole nother phone call. I have learned a lot. Uh, I would market this very differently. I would have more of a transition team in place if I do this again. Um, this isn't dropping your kid off at a dorm. I lived at Luna Azul for 2 years with my daughter while my wife was still in Seattle, just to get the caregivers in place. And I mean, it's a big deal. This isn't dropping your kid off to somebody else's care. You're orchestrating the care in this home. So that's the bad news. The good news is you're orchestrating the care in the home. So it's exactly what you and your child want and need, and nothing more and nothing less. And, I put in the time, and, for the first time in our lives, my wife and I are vacationing. I mean, we can go in my married life, or since I've had kids, uh, we can take a week or two and go away. We were never able to do that. I think the payout is huge. And we never wanted my older daughter to become a burden on my younger daughter as an adult. So I know the legacy plan so often is that a sibling will step up and take care of the kid, and that's laudable. That's great. And if that's happening in your home, just that is, there's probably nothing better than that. But my younger daughter, winced at the prospect of having to take her in as an adult when she had her own career and she had her own family. And so I think the payouts here are huge, but the work to make it happen is there's more of it. And so what did I learn? That's one of the things I learned. But it's a whole separate phone call. I learned a lot.
Yeah, so a lot of these questions, I believe we already addressed them. So I'm going to go to a question that may not have been addressed. So were you the developer for this project, or did you hire somebody to actually manage the entire development?
Huh. I'm the developer.
Okay.
I mean, I surrounded myself with people that knew a lot more. But they had to be paid. And I mean, I wouldn't have gotten debt financing if I didn't have, I mean, if I was doing first in the nation, first of its kind in the nation, never been done before by a guy who's also never done any real estate development, probably would not have gotten the financing. It was smart to surround myself with people that knew more than me. But once again, it's like co-housing. 10 families get together and they're going to buy a parcel and they're going to build 10 homes. Right there, you have 20 opinions.
Yep.
And very often in my experience, it doesn't get off the ground, or everybody's a volunteer, or everybody, often, and as they're paying money, have strong opinions, and they should, about the direction the development should take. This needed a leader.
Yeah.
This needed a voice. Uh, and I decided it was going to be me. I mean, it was my vision, and I'm the one that pulled together the financing. I'm the one that pulled together the team. I'm the one that signed, that video you saw at the very beginning that Ashley showed was Fortress. They would send us those drone shots every once in a while to show us the progress they had made. I chose that contractor. I uh, uh, I worked long hours.
Yeah. What was the overall cost of the project?
I'm embarrassed to say it was probably a, 1.5 million to 2 million higher than it needed to be. So I'm going to say it came out around $16 million from, I mean, all in, everything, all marketing, all construction, the land, the legal, everything. It should have been less than that. Interest and insurance and some hard money at the end, and really, and the time. I mean, we had, because of the pandemic, and again, this new model, it took a while for parents to understand what was required of them to buy in. Really extended the time period here. And so I think if there is a next one, um, I could probably do it for less.
Are the price points affordable for people with disabilities? I mean, that's yeah,
No, they're not. I
yeah.
mean, if you're on SSI, there's no way.
Mhm.
This is, I mean, parents are paying for this. That's it. Now, the charitable foundation that I created that is now exploring whether and how to do other Luna Azuls, one of its mission points is to make homes available to people that couldn't otherwise afford. So, or either, help them with the house purchase or the HOA dues or both, or what, I mean, um, I understand the optics of this, that, oh, is this just for rich people with, or people with disabilities that have rich parents? Um, Microsoft CEO does not live there. We don't have anybody that is that wealthy, and we even have moms that live there. I told you one that is a retired registered nurse, and a single mother who lives there. Nobody is out of the ballpark wealthy that lives there, but also uh, nobody that is on SSI alone is getting this done, to my knowledge. I don't know how they would.
Yeah, so in terms of staffing in the homes, are families responsible for overseeing this piece in terms of care coordination, managing
Yes,
the day? Yeah. Okay.
yes. So
And
inside the home services, yes, it is orchestrated entirely by the owners.
how are the individuals taking title, special needs trust?
Yes. So my wife and I took it as, she and I originally, and then we transferred it to a trust. Or it can, some states, it'll automatically retitle to a trust on the second to die or something like that.
So how
Um,
difficult is it to obtain a waiver in Medicaid resident? I don't know about residential, Medicaid waiver in Arizona.
so we were really lucky. So we sweated that moving down from Washington State because our kid had been in the system since she was born. She was still in the special care nursery when we applied, I think. And we knew we were going to another state. We knew how high the state was ranked in terms of what those services are. But in Arizona, like every state, there are rules who's eligible. For us, we were approved in like 6 weeks from the time we sent in the application. Um, I think partly because one of the diagnoses my daughter had is specifically mentioned in the rule. Um, and so the people at our experience, and I wasn't applying as a developer in Phoenix, I was applying as a dad of a kid that had just moved to Arizona. The people were very friendly, very responsive, and again, it was 6 weeks. Now, um, I do know of a couple families that have not had the same experience. Uh, they'll they all will be, if they're not already, in the system and approved in Arizona. But there's somebody different that answered the phone. So I think um, it's it's better than a lot of states, but it's obviously not perfect.
Do you, so for somebody who's asking about how much land was required, I believe that was 4 acres, right? You have, this was built
It's about 4.5.
4.5. Do you run background checks on all residents?
Um, no, we do. We should have, and but honestly, after 8 years of trying to sell homes, you'll take what comes in the door to some extent. We do certainly with respect to staff members who work for the HOA, and we monitor the caregivers that the residents have chosen themselves, the coming and going and stuff like that. But the residents themselves, no, or the owners, they're buying real estate, and I appreciate the question. There absolutely could have been a different outcome. There could have been somebody buying that, I guess, for another motive, but that's not what happened. It really worked out for us, and we were very concerned. Also, are we going to get uh, way more males than females, for example? And that also didn't happen. I think we have more females than males.
Hmm. How are people finding and funding caregivers? I mean, they bring in their own waiver, so they get funded for caregiving, for services, right? But how are the people finding caregivers?
So in Arizona, they're called qualified vendors, and DES here, one of those
DDL.
agencies that start with the letter D, uh, will give you a list of approved vendors throughout the state. Now, part of the benefit of Luna Azul is all the parents know one another, and you have a director at the clubhouse who is very experienced and knows vendors and so everybody's sharing notes and giving advice, and the parents are every bit as much part of this community as their kids who might live there full time. And so finding vendors for me was talking to other moms that live there, and And by the way, also talking to our director, that's how I ended up with two vendors working for in my home.
Where are you looking to build another pocket neighborhood so we can all move out there?
Great question. As you might expect, one thing I'm really focused on right now with this charitable foundation is whether there is a financing source. And I think there might be. If there is, then the next question is just what you're asking, where are you going to build it? And so, um, Ashley, you and I were just talking about this yesterday. There are a lot of articles ranking states about the quality of life uh, for people with disabilities and how great this state is or this city is or how horrible this one is. Um, but one and they report the metrics that they are analyzing to reach their conclusions. But I've never seen the metric access to caregivers. And if any of you, this is very important to me. And I think with this model, it's because this is supported housing. I think it's even more important. So I'm not going to build this in North Scottsdale. You know, if any of you are familiar with the area, just very wealthy area and higher cost of living and real estate so expensive. I'm not going to build there. Same time, I'm not going to build in a slum. But you need to be, I believe, for this model, the acts. So you could build in a city where the cost of living is fine, but there are very few people who've chosen to become caregivers. And this is huge if you're relying on a supported housing model. How deep is that pool? So shorter answer, nobody's waving. I'm assuming I'm blathering.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm looking at the west side of Phoenix right now, but we're also considering other states.
Um, we only have a few minutes left, but if people would like to stick around for the next 10, 15 minutes, that would be great. If Mark, you have
Yeah, happy
availability.
to.
Okay. Is there public transportation available from the community to downtown areas for shopping and recreation?
Um, I mean, yes, but the bus doesn't come all the way up to our facility, and another that was some analysis. But the bus system in Phoenix is horrible. There is a light rail system, but we're not anywhere near the light rail. So there is dial ride. So my daughter goes to day services by taking, I pay a monthly fee and they come and get her every morning and drop and pick her up and drop her off in the afternoons for next to nothing. Um, but as far as but we are not on the bus line. We're like a mile away from the closest bus stop.
Okay.
Not ideal.
How do people get on your wait list?
Well, our director at Luna Azul, now, if you go to the website, lunaphx.com, that's the Luna Azul website, and Coley is her name, and her phone number is on that site. And if you just call her or send an email, hit the link in the email. Um, we're starting this. Nobody's moving out. We did have one family move out, not unhappy with the model. It's just they didn't think their son was developing how they wanted, so they moved back to California. Um, Nobody else is moving out. So we have this waiting list. If you're interested, climb on it. And obviously, if I do build another one in Maricopa County or in Pennsylvania or New York or whatever, the people on that list obviously will know.
What was the range of the cost of the homes, kind of sales prices, and do most have mortgages?
Um, so as a developer, I don't know. So at closing, the developer just gets so much money. And whether that money came from a lender or came from the individual's bank account, I don't know.
Yeah.
I believe more than half mortgaged the property, but probably upwards of half or a little less paid cash.
What was the sales
The
price?
prices opened at about low 400s to low 500s. They're 2 and 3 bedroom homes, and there were 4 different models. Um, they never, the most expensive never was above like 5.5.
Did you do pre-sales?
We tried. We did lot reservations. And that's very early on, and that's fully refundable. And we had like 20 of the 30 homes reserved, and we were pretty optimistic. But a lot of those people fell away. I think for reasons that again are a whole nother phone call. Um, we we had to, in order to build, we were allowed by our construction lender 4 spec homes that is not sold, and any number of pre-sold homes. And so once we were spec'd out, if we had built 4 homes that were sitting there vacant, and we had already built, or we're in the process of building the ones that had been bought, then we had to stop. And that's part of the reason it took so long. So we did pre-sell. We tried to pre-sell. We absolutely did pre-sell. Um, and we always kept one of the homes or 2 for a while, as models, so people could go in and see what they were getting.
So people are asking for your contact information. They want to know if you are open to consulting. Um, I know that you didn't make any money developing this. You didn't take any developer fee yourself. So,
That's why I should have gotten lottery tickets earlier. So I'd be honored to consult, but I'm doing that. I work for this foundation that I created now too, that has a big board, and so I don't even know what my fee is. I'm sure it'll be reasonable, but and I'm going to know more by next week. I may have some access to some funding that might allow me to stamp these out in various states. Once again, I'm going to be really curious though about, the cost of living in any jurisdiction and the depth of the caregiver pool. I really think that's going to be key. So, otherwise, if, there's a place I wouldn't have chosen to build, but there's somebody that wants me to consult, I'd be honored to.
yeah. Can I give out your MDR, aplusmlaw.com
Sure.
information? Okay, so I'm typing it in the chat box. It's MDR at aplusmlaw.com.
Correct.
How can people be informed about the next development so that they can purchase a home or get on the wait list? Is it all on the website of lunaphx.com?
So to get on the wait list, I would urge you to just go to the website and hit the, interested. I think there's 2 buttons. One, you're interested to buy, or you're interested to rent. Just hit either one of those and send a message. You start the message with that, direct it to Coley, which is short for Nicole, Coley, and she'll put you on the waiting list. Anybody on the Luna Azul waiting list is gonna know about where we're built. If my foundation is going to build more of these, or if one of these homes at Luna Azul become available, people on the wait list are going to know about it.
What is the name of the foundation?
It's called the Cottage Foundation. It is a
Oh,
501(c)(3)
okay.
Arizona nonprofit.
All right. So how are you, there's one more question about service companies. How are you addressing the issue that separate care companies can just drop your services?
So let me put on my glasses. I want to read that question slowly. Which one is that?
It's by Carrie Mannyhan's Life Sharing Communities. How are you addressing the issue that separate care companies can drop your services?
Can drop my services?
Yeah. Or you,
So the first thing I have to say to that is, boy, is that true. And whoever asked that question has has been through it, and just or the care person just ghosts you or just doesn't show up and no call and no nothing. And by the way, my daughter's not going to eat that day. And so I'm real aware of this solution or this problem, which is why I'm so focused on the quality of the caregiver pool and whether I can replace them. But I think whoever asked that question is asking it the other way, that they can drop you. And that is true. The first thing I would say to that is, so that is the case in any supported model, supported housing model, that the vendor can ghost you or not show up. That's not a problem that's unique to Luna Azul. Secondly, so if you were here for the whole talk, I was talking about, like, we have somebody living upstairs in our home for added peace of mind for us. And we're giving her way discounted rent and utilities and all that stuff just to live there and be a roommate to my daughter. She's sort of the house manager. Now, she has her own life and she has a job she has to go to and stuff. But if there is a problem, she's there. Like if the caregiver got in a car wreck or something like that, she's going to sleep there that night. She's going to be there that night or the next morning. Now, that was our approach. That was my wife's and my approach. Again, we're the only ones, I think, in Luna Azul that have done it that way. The other thing is, too, our staff at Luna Azul does not provide in-home services. They're not a licensed vendor. But if like keys are lost inside the house or something, there's a cupboard that was locked up, they can go to the clubhouse, the caregiver can, they have spares there. So, or I gave the example of if my daughter was afraid somebody was in the backyard, the staff is there 24/7 for immediate help, or emergency help, or if there's a fire or a flood. And like I think I told y'all, my daughter is capable and often does spend the night there alone. Um, but there's someone else there that I can call on. And in my home, there's even somebody else upstairs. So that peace of mind for us, that redundancy, that's the way we did it. Most families are relying, I think, just on the overnight staff in case there's an emergency. I hope, once again, is somebody waving that I'm talking too much? Sorry.
No, no, no. Does New York have a live-in care budget option in self-direction budgets? Does Arizona have self-direction program?
So the answer is, I don't know what that is. I have a feeling I know what that is. And
I think it's like in-house in-home support services type of stuff.
so I get to choose. So Emma is approved for so many hours a week of, habilitation and care hours and, uh, the other adjectives they have for the various things. Um, I get to choose the vendor. And once I have chosen or her mother or our house manager, or whatever, chooses or replaces the vendor, the state won't pay us. The state pays a qualified vendor only.
Mhm.
But I can choose or replace or fire, any vendor, any.
But does Arizona not have live-in caregiver budget?
Yep. Well, again, so um, so these are called IDLAs in Arizona, individually designed living arrangement. They're
Mhm.
supported housing concept that California does a little differently. Washington, I mean, so I think it's more of a Western United States phenomenon than Eastern. Um, it's it's up to me how this works. My daughter is approved for so much. If my daughter needed 24/7 care, the state might buck and say, we're not going to approve your home as an IDLA because if it's 24/7 care, they should have a roommate or something. Okay. Um, that didn't happen with us, and I know that didn't happen. There's somebody else, or I can think of two other people on at Luna Azul whose kid needs 24/7 care and lives in the home alone, and Arizona pays for staff to be there. Now, are they live in? No, I think they're all caregivers that come for 8-hour shifts. I
Because
don't,
So in California, we have what's called in-home support services. It's not a 24-hour care, but for those that do need somebody more like to as a live-in care provider, it could be either a family member or anyone else that could live together, but they don't necessarily have to provide 24-hour. It could be like 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week. But
yeah.
there is a budget for live-in caregivers. So I think the person asking that question is that option available in
I
Arizona?
was approved. So when I lived there, I worked for a vendor and I had an
Okay.
app on my phone. And because again, we were having trouble finding the caregivers, even though there is a deeper pool here than there is, for example, in Seattle, um, getting them lined up the way we needed. I was living here. I would clock in and I could clock out, and I lived upstairs. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think thank you so much for those of you that have stayed past that hour. And we are actually going to have another webinar with Mark. What is it called? The survival kit. What do you
Oh,
call it?
thank you. Well, thank you. Yes, I was pushing this through my law firm. I was pushing a survival kit because I know most people have estate plans and special needs trusts and stuff, but my concern was, well, like what happens tomorrow? Like if my wife and I don't make it home from dinner. So, and my other daughter is in Seattle in college. And so who are the locals? Who are the temporary guardians, and have I memorialized what my daughter's proclivities are, and how she eats and what her diet is and where she likes to go and what she likes to do. My daughter has little idea. My other daughter, the one in college. So I designed this kit uh, to help parents, and it's. I mean, I just help clients in the 3 states I'm licensed in, but there's not a lot of magic to this kit. I mean, some of the forms are state specific, but you could take the forms to a local attorney. Most of it is the interview of the particularities of your kid's care that does whoever is showing up, first of all, know not to call the police because the police are going to put your kid in foster care. And secondly, then, so what to do and who to call, like right now. Um, anyway, I thought that was a problem unique to this club we're all in. And I don't see other estate planning attorneys doing anything like this.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your story. It's so inspiring. I think many families are just very moved by what you had to sacrifice and overcome to build this amazing place for your daughter and others like her. So I really appreciate your testimony and your perseverance. And I really hope that you can replicate that model all over the country. We're all lining up
Well,
for that.
you're very welcome. It was a pleasure.